To go to our last presenter, Professor Samuels.
I think there's certain factors we have to look at. So the history that we've talked about is the state, for various reasons, cut the funding to the UC. Substituting general fund support with Cal grants is not the same thing. It's not direct funding for the institution. So it's not an exact substitution. I understand it costs the state as much, but it does create a certain problem, and that problem was filled by non-resident tuition. But what happened is that the campuses that had previously, over decades, gotten much more state support and tuition dollars because of an unequal funding policy, were able to bring in many more non-resident students. And so the result was that the campuses that are highly selective, like Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego, were able to bring in many more non-resident students than the other campuses, which meant they were able to bring in much more money. And so we have really a separate and unequal funding system, where the campuses which have the highest number of underrepresented students are receiving the lowest level of per-student funding. And it's gotten much worse, and it's going to get worse this year because I think the legislature and the governor came up with a very bad policy. They allowed non-resident tuition to increase 8% this year and 8% next year, so it's about $25,000 extra you get per non-resident student. And they froze in-state tuition. And so the result is, think of it, you're telling the UC, okay, we're going to give you $25 million if you increase your California residents' enrollment by 5,000. So that's $5,000 per student for 1 year. You're going to do a one-time $25 million increase. Well, if the UC, instead of enrolling 5,000 students from California, enrolls an additional 5,000 students from elsewhere and gets $25,000 extra per year over 4 years, that is $500 million. So you're asking the university to exchange potential $500 million for $25 million. So I don't understand how that policy on any level makes sense. And on top of it, you're attaching strings. So why would the university take that deal? Why would they take so much less money with strings attached when they can continue to take in more non-resident students? Now, on the university side, I think it's disingenuous on two levels. One is that the money that they're bringing from non-resident tuition, say if you have 35, 40% of your students coming in from non-resident students at Berkeley, UCLA, and San Diego, that money doesn't get shared with the California students from the other campuses. There's no revenue sharing. There's no sense. I mean, you're bringing in more revenue from non-resident tuition, but that's not being used to support California students. That's being used to support the students at UCLA and Berkeley and San Diego. So unless you have a revenue sharing system, I don't see how the university can make the argument that the non-resident students help to subsidize the California students. And the other thing is that we've seen is the UC, yes, is complying to the master plan, but I think it's accepting 15,000 students who did not apply to Merced this year and accepting them at Merced. And last year, only 2% of those students accepted. So I'm not trying to put down Merced, but I'm trying to look at the numbers and the facts, that this is kind of a false compliance with the master plan, because on some level, the university must know that 98% or a vast majority of the students are not going to accept those offers. And so non-resident tuition kind of distorts everything. It distorts our ability to fund students. A lot of studies say that the underrepresented students need the most amount of support and funding, and they're getting the least amount. And so while the governor has moved to try to equalize funding through K through 12, we have an unequal system in higher education, and it's getting worse, especially in the UC system. So I think I'll give you 5 recommendations. One is to develop some type of revenue sharing system for non-resident tuition for the UC system. I think you have to go back to having some type of enrollment targets. I don't understand why the governor doesn't want to do that. You have to have some type of marginal cost of instruction. There was AB 94. I don't think the university gave an effective response to that. So we don't know how much things cost, and we don't have targets of who are enrolling. And the final thing, which I think is the most important, is there's no agreement of what the state is actually supporting. Are you supporting? Okay. Are you supporting research? Are you supporting medical education? We were told in the UC's response to AB 94 that it costs $250,000 per year to educate a medical student. Is the state paying for that? How much of that should the state pay? So I think that if the university really, if the state really wants to have an effect on these issues, it has to really look at the hard numbers, and it has to look at the financial aspects, and it has to, I think, give more money to the UC, but in terms put some requirements on it so that it can help to make the system more equal. Because otherwise, you're just going to have the wealthy campuses where the wealthy students go get more money, and the poorest campuses where the poor students go get less money.
Okay. A lot of food for thought there. If you can, please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kevin Sabo. I'm a fourth year at UC Berkeley, and I'm the newly elected president of the UC Student Association. And I just wanted to share some thoughts and observations from the hearing today. One about the funding. I think a lot of members have spoken to this, that it's one thing to say that there has been an increase to grant aid, but there are a lot of other costs, and there are a lot of student support services, and there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be included when we increase or we make requirements and demands of the UC to increase student enrollment. There are students on campuses that I speak to every day who are living in parking lots, who are living in offices. There's a real crisis of housing and access to classes and access to support services, and it's not to say that we can just cram 5,000 more students. So I encourage the legislature and the UC to be more imaginative in how we incorporate those increases to students. I also wanted to speak to the issue about diversity, that I heard a lot about how I guess to sum it in one way, more cynically, is that we have diversity, we have Riverside, we have Merced. Students want to apply to other campuses than Merced and Riverside for different reasons. I'm from the Central Valley. I didn't want to stay in the Central Valley. I wanted to go to the Bay Area. I didn't want to go to Southern California. So to say that it's okay, we can move these students off to Riverside and Merced and pretend that that makes us more diverse, I think is a little cheap, and we need to be more imaginative in how we can incorporate different students, specifically students of color, at the campuses that are more, I forget the euphemistic term that was used, but campuses like Berkeley and LA and San Diego. And lastly, just to speak to, I guess this kind of goes with the diversity point, that UCSA is really excited that we've added the diversity questions, or the gender questions and the sexual orientation questions, to the UC application. We think that it's going to do a better job to inform questions related to resources and facilities and things like that. But I did want to conclude that I'm pretty disappointed as a member of the public that there are 18 individuals between the Higher Education Committee and the Budget Subcommittee, and there is a single member of the Assembly here chairing the meeting. That it's really disappointing as a member of the public to come here to sit through very, very many hours, especially as a student, of individuals talking about students, but students and members of the public not having the opportunity to engage folks who are around this table. So again, this is the second time that I've thanked Assemblymember McCarthy for being one of the only people left. So thank you for winning the Perfect Attendance Award and for being here. But I really hope that the 17 other individuals who are here really step up their attendance game and really just show some respect for public comment. And that's all. Thank you.